Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be talking about the new Godzilla -1 movie and why I think audiences found the main character story to be so compelling, whereas usually in these sorts of movies, the human element is the least interesting part of the story. So I saw the recent Godzilla movie, and I'll say that I'm not a Godzilla fan. I never got into it. But the film was absolutely excellent. I would recommend anyone to go to the theaters and see it. The main character of Godzilla -1 is Kiyoshi Shakishima, who is supposed to be a kamikaze pilot, but ultimately chickened out, pretending that his plane was having mechanical failures, landed on an island, and that just so happens to be the one that Godzilla considered his territory. The film starts out at the very tail end of the Second World War, as he's complaining about mechanical failures on his plane. For all the audiences might know, the Enola Gay might be already in flight. In any case, he returns to Japan as a disgraced soldier, primarily and specifically because he returned, and you're not supposed to do that as a kamikaze pilot. Much of the rest of the movie involves the consequences of a US nuclear testing, resulting in the dinosaur-like creature from the island he landed on becoming a giant atomic creature that now considers all of Japan its territory, and follows Koichi and his crew trying to survive and ultimately try to kill Godzilla, with the titular monster basically representing the internal struggle Koichi faces as someone that his own country considers a coward and almost a traitor. So, why is Koichi so interesting? There's obviously the fact that the movie was excellently written and excellently acted, but I don't think that accounts for absolutely everything. I think there's one other element to this movie that makes it stand out from other disaster and kaiju films. In most disaster movies, in order to juxtapose the fantastic nature of what's going on, be it giant robots, or the apocalypse, or the moon is falling, or there's a giant monster running around, they want to have the main characters be as grounded and relatable as possible. And I do mean as possible. They are usually, by all accounts, regular-ass people with regular-ass problems. The conflicts and character arcs these people go through, in addition to trying to avoid being crushed by the giant thing, tends to be stuff like, oh, I'm divorced and my wife thinks I'm a piece of shit, or I'm disconnected from my kids, or dad just doesn't get it, it's not a phase, or my job sucks, or people suck. Overall, just stuff that quite a few people in the audience either have first-hand experience with or know someone who went through it. A perfectly, completely relatable character in basically every way, shape, and form. But what if the winning formula isn't to be completely relatable? What if the winning formula is to have a human character going through something that realistically no one in the audience themselves are going through? Koichi's struggle is that he was supposed to be a kamikaze pilot and subsequently die for his country. But he chickened out, and he needs to learn that there is value in continuing to live, and that pointless sacrifice is just that, pointless. There's no honor, there's no prestige in dying in such a trivial and stupid way. The film's definitely not subtle about that message. I mean, hell, towards the end, with a kind of rallying monologue about killing Godzilla, the film's smart character Kenji Noda explicitly calls out the Japanese Imperial Army for having such a dim view on the value of individual lives. Now, I'm going to go out of limb here and say that the majority of the audience members, the totality perhaps, are not expected to die at their jobs. Not even that there's risk of death, like being a paramedic or pizza delivery boy, but you're not supposed to come back. You clock in and you're never gonna clock out, but who knows, maybe there's some soon-to-be suicide bomber in Afghanistan sitting there like, oh my god, this is literally me. So, rather than following a character with a completely relatable circumstance that you've probably seen or heard about 1,000 times, you're following a character with a very novel set of human circumstances. How does a kamikaze pilot get over survivor's guilt? How does he overcome the prejudice and culture of the country he was supposed to die for? Yes, some elements of his character are things that some audience members could potentially relate to. He was a former veteran, whether or not he saw combat with the Americans and not just giant lizards. And he did suffer from PTSD, which many people, especially former veterans, do. But again, the expectation for those veterans is they might die in their line of duty, but they're not supposed to. So, when the big guy isn't on screen, you're not just following Joe Schmo as he overcomes a he said, she said that led to his divorce, but instead the Joe Schmo overcoming the irrational nature of his culture that expected him to die. Even if the really cool CGI monster isn't destroying CGI landscapes in a budget that might as well amount to a couple pennies and some IOU notes, you're still following something novel and compelling, something different. So that, combined with solid writing and solid acting and a likable cast of supporting characters, I think is what makes Koichi's journey so much more compelling than the average disaster movie protagonist, where you're really just kind of indulging the director, going through the numbers so you can eventually see the disaster and the explosions and the destruction. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it, and it's just one of many reasons to watch this film. I do wholeheartedly recommend it. You should definitely see it in theaters. It deserves your dosh. You're going to get more out of it than you paid for it. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, that I gave you something to think about and otherwise entertained you. Take care.